All right, I'd like to call the Village of Cottage Grove Village Board of Trustees meeting to order on Monday, February 7th. It is 6:30 p.m. on my watch. We are holding this as a Zoom meeting due to the ongoing pandemic. The Zoom link is at the top of the agenda, or if one prefers, there is a audio call-in number and associated meeting ID with that. Let's confirm that we have a quorum. So Lisa, please.
Allen,
Present.
Murphy,
Present.
Peterson,
Here.
Ratcliffe, Valencia,
Present.
Vandervelde,
Here.
and Williams.
Present. All right, we have a quorum. The agenda was properly posted. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, so find a flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, then item 4 is public appearances, public's opportunity to speak. We just ask that if someone from the public would like to speak, that they share their name, their address, their municipality, as well as hold their comments to no more than 3 minutes, just in case we do have a number of people who would like to speak. So with that, if anyone would like to jump in, please find your mute button and we'll share away. All right, we'll move on to item 5, and that is to discuss and consider our meeting minutes from our regular board meeting held on January 19th, 2022, and our special meeting trustees on January 31st, 2022. Both those meeting minutes are in our packets. Any questions, comments, or edits, or consideration for motion?
I move to approve the village board minutes from January 19th, 2022 and January 31, 2022.
Second.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, David. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor then?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries.
I abstain on the 119 meeting
Okay,
minutes.
thank you, Troy. Lisa, you have that? Okay, super. Then moving on then to new business. First up is to discuss and consider the contract with IT management services with Johnson Block. I believe the agreement was in our packet. Rick, you got anything else to share with us?
Not a whole lot, just that we worked with Johnson and Block to negotiate this, gathered input from staff and also David to improve it. We feel like it's in a good position now and we would recommend approval.
All right, any questions, comments from board members?
I make a motion to approve the contract for IT management services with Johnson Block.
All right, thanks, David. Is there a second? Thanks, Sarah. And a third to Troy. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Next up then under new business is to discuss and consider resolution 2022-01 regarding authorization of BCPL State Trust Fund loan.
John, I'll handle this. Alicia's on vacation. I'm jealous.
Yep. Yes, I heard.
So this is just simply getting the board's authorization to apply for this loan, which would execute the plans in our financial management plan to do a refinancing for some of our tax increment district number 5 debt. So when we actually issue the debt, there will be some additional action, I believe, that will be required, but this is just authorizing staff to fill out the application.
All right, thanks, Matt. Any questions from board members? I think you touched on this before, Matt, a bit ago, the plans to do this. If not, then this is the discuss and consider.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2022-01 regarding authorization for BCPL State Trust Fund loan.
I'll second.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Paul. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Next, we have discuss and consider an encroachment into the greenway easement on property at 441 Clearbrick Terrace for the construction of a swimming pool. This is very similar, I think, in our packet to a request that was made last year in that same area. Aaron, do you want to touch on this?
Yep, this is almost identical to the request that came from the Foster family last year. Reed Foster came to some of the meetings. Back in April, we approved his request to encroach within the green space easement. This was after Rick and Larry kind of looked at the different easements that were in effect in the different neighborhoods in that area. In this neighborhood, Okengate, it was their opinion that the board did have authority to grant an encroachment within that public greenway and buffer strip easement with whatever conditions we saw appropriate. In the case of the Fosters, they were allowed to encroach within the easement up to 50 feet with the condition that they not encroach on the 100-year floodplain line. So Mr. Firewall is here representing the family at 437 Clearbrook, which is one parcel north of the Fosters, making the same request. So the staff recommendation in the staff report is that we grant the request with those same conditions that we applied for the Fosters. And then following that approval, if you so choose to grant that, the applicant would have either a surveyor or an engineer prepare a site plan showing, the existing home, the proposed pool, the relevant easement lines and floodplain lines. And then we would ask them to sign a reimbursement agreement for any engineering costs Strand might incur in determining that floodplain boundary on that specific property and reviewing the site plan. I think Mr. Farwell, I saw him on here. Dwayne, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Sorry, repeat that.
I just noticed you were on here and wasn't sure if you had anything to add to that.
And you might be on double mute. I don't know. We're not hearing you.
Are you waiting for me at all? This is Dwayne.
Yeah, Aaron asked if you had anything else to add from what he just summarized.
Okay. I was having some bandwidth issues here, some delay. I don't at this time, no.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us this evening. And any questions or comments for Aaron regarding this from board members?
Aaron, quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
When I look at the map that was included in our packet, do we know where the 100-year flood line is, or where the boundary is? That's what the engineering is supposed to determine?
We don't know exactly. We'll want Strand to determine it on that parcel because it changes obviously as the drainage way changes elevation also.
Okay.
based on the contours on Access Day, and I think it generally kind of starts in the center of the southern property line and heads towards the northwest corner of the parcel. So it looks like there's probably more area to work with on this site than there was on the Foster site, but again, that would have to be verified.
Okay. Because I see kind of a dotted line in the map that kind of runs that direction you were mentioning.
That may be an approximation of the line, but we'll want Strand to
Okay,
verify.
cool. Thank you.
Other questions?
I'll make a motion to
I'll make a
approve
motion to
the,
approve.
I'll keep going. The encroachment request with the conditions as laid out in the memo.
Second.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Troy. Any further discussion? Having heard none then, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed?
I vote no.
Okay. Anyone abstain? Motion carries. All right. Moving then to item D. That is to discuss and consider amendments to Chapter 12 of the Village Ordinances regarding boards, committees, and commissions. So there is a memo in the packet outlining that. Matt, I don't know if you want to walk through this.
Sure. I'm just sharing my screen because it's a little bit easier for me to talk to you guys and look at my memo at the same time. So many of the village's ordinances were established in the early 90s when the village was much smaller and needed many more working committees before we had a professional staff. And this section of the ordinances, which is over 30 pages long, has really just been added to over the years without kind of looking at it comprehensively. And we've added about 7 different committees, commissions, and boards in the last handful of years. So we just wanted to kind of almost take like an audit approach of this section of the ordinances to make sure we don't become too big of a bureaucracy than we need to be. And we can probably even do more than this, but I think this might be something that we take a look at maybe annually, maybe every other year. But this was just kind of staff's first look at it. And once I counted that we had 26 committees, commissions, and boards, that just seems way more than we need. So let's just take a look and how we can be maybe more efficient with what we have. And one of the first steps, I think, is amending the language that talks about committees meeting at least on a monthly basis. I mean, other than the village board, I'm not aware of any committee that would meet more than monthly. And even having this kind of general expectation that committees will meet monthly, sometimes I think is unrealistic and puts unnecessary pressure on committee chairs and staff to think of agenda items that, if there isn't something that needs action, there's nothing wrong with meeting quarterly or any other time frame. So I think loosening up that language. And then there were some of these committees that were listed are just no longer in use. So we should take those out of our code. Examples of those would be the Joint Village Town Law Enforcement Committee, the Tree Advisory Board, which is now under the purview of Parks, Recreation, and Forestry, and then the Economic Development Committee, which is now the Community Development Authority. And then there were a few examples that we came up with of areas to potentially consolidate, repurpose, or rename the committees. The code actually has one section that correctly reflects the Parks, Recreation, and Forestry Committee, but there's also a section that talks about them individually, one being the Rec Committee and one being the Park Committee. So we'd want to correct that language. The Finance and Personnel Committee, and for most of the last decade, that committee has generally been meeting 2 or 3 times a year to discuss the financial management plan and the village budget. So I think a rebrand of that committee and adding, just a few simple duties being to reflect what we're actually doing is important. So that being an annual review of the financial management plan and the village budget, and then kind of a third catch-all, just, if there's some other miscellaneous financial matter that the village would want reviewed by the finance committee, I think that, by the budget review committee, that would be appropriate. Another discussion point that we had was ad hoc sustainability committee. And just, this was an efficiency thing. And our thought was, since a lot of the sustainability measures also go back through our Public Works and Properties Committee, was to maybe add that into that committee and then expand the membership from 5 to 7, with 2 of those members being existing ad hoc sustainability committee members. So that one is more of a discussion point than a recommendation, just to get some board feedback. And then there was another, talking about the Public Works Committee. It is Public Works and Properties, so we should adjust that name as well. And then finally, there's a couple of committees that I think we could move away from. The Ordinance Review Committee, the main purpose of that started when the village was establishing its code, and we've gone years where it's been active, many years where it's been inactive, and then back again. And I think with the combination of our staff and legal team and our existing committees that we can direct ordinance issues to, I don't think we need a standalone committee for this. So and I might turn it over momentarily to Heidi to talk about this a little bit more. Heidi's the chair of the Ordinance Review Committee, and she reached out for some feedback and had discussions with the Ordinance Review Committee, and based on that feedback, that's where this recommendation is also revolved around. Heidi, do you have any comments at this time?
Sure, thanks, Matt. So we did discuss this at Ordinance Review Committee last week, I believe. And of course, the committee members are enthusiastic to serve their community and in any capacity that they are able, which is very appreciative of residents, stepping up to make a difference and help in the community. But we did have some discussions around the extra, maybe unnecessary steps that the structure would create by going back and forth between ordinance review, the board, other committees, and then some budget challenges. If other committees are also updating their ordinances, how would the committee know what budget they'd have to work with? Some other challenges were staffing, because the staff member doesn't support the committee. So it's a lot of work back and forth between staff, committees, board to get direction. So it's really kind of a inefficient extra step, although they did feel like it was some of the ordinances that they had updated, and like they felt good about helping with that, but not that they couldn't be covered by another committee. So I think we just had a group of residents that like to be involved, but that this committee could be handled by other committees and the board and staff, as Matt kind of summarized. So that was sort of the discussion at Ordinance Review. JJ was on that meeting also. Did I miss any points from that?
Nope, got them all.
All right, thanks, Heidi. And then moving on to the Public Relations Committee, in the past handful of years, if not longer, that committee's been meeting just once a year to review the budget, which is just a couple line items. Initially, the Public Relations Committee was established to work on the village's website and maybe social media presence. And over time, as we've added staff, that's been something that department heads have taken on. And then later this year, a full-time communications person will further be taking those reins. So it's also the opinion of staff then that we could move away from this committee. And Troy, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but Troy's the chair of this committee, and I don't know if you have any thoughts that you want to share, Troy, on this one.
I have no issues with any of the recommendations, Matt. I think we become a committee large, and we can narrow them down and still be just as productive as a village. So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So John, that kind of concludes our thoughts. We're certainly open to additional thoughts or changes to these, or really anything. And the idea would be that based on the direction tonight, the legal team would do some redrafting and bring back a final ordinance to be considered.
All right, thanks, Matt and Heidi and Troy. Any comments from board members, questions?
I'm curious, John and Heidi, your opinion on the sustainability piece. I know that's, would you suggest to be part of the recommendation of including it into that other committee?
How do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I think that we have some very enthusiastic members of our committee that are really interested in a lot of different topics, and a lot of them do overlap with at least, I haven't been to Public Works meeting, but from what I see on Public Works and just the presentation we were discussing last month overlapped with transportation and then also going green on our buildings and with our vehicles. That overlaps with Public Works and Properties also. So I could see, combining that. It's a lot for one board member, so I don't know if we make up the work of, or the makeup of the committee to include 2 board members and then 5 residents, but I'd be open to, 1 board member and then the 6 residents also.
My only comment is that I like the fact that this would make permanent sustainability rather than saying ad hoc, because it is permanent in the way we function as a community going forward. So that's the piece I like. However we make that happen, and is totally, I don't really care, but I just that part I do like.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I didn't even think of the fact that it still had that ad hoc title as well. So that is an added benefit to that solution.
Other comments, questions from board members on this overall, or any specific recommendation?
One other thing to consider, just to float it out there, not to make things more complicated, but if the board wanted to, I mean, of course you guys could, if you wanted to, you could do a lot of different things, but one option could be the budget review committee. The board could handle all of that. You don't really need a committee. I've gotten feedback from others over the years that since it's a committee that has three board members and 2 citizens, that kind of, why doesn't the board just have a couple special meetings and not have the committee? But that's just another potential thought if that's something you wanted to consider. But at the end of the day, I think you'll want to have the financial management plan looked at twice, once in draft form, once in final form, and same thing with the budget, to allow for that additional review.
Matt, I'm glad you brought that up because I know Melissa and I talked about it, and Heidi and I had also kind of had this conversation as well. So I think from my perspective, I like the whatever currently the finance committee, someday maybe known as the budget review committee, whatever the committee made up of trustees and public members. I think from my perspective, I like the more eyes and opinions on the budget. I think the better. You could certainly argue that the public is free to weigh in at any point and can email, but email, call, whatever. But I do like that there's formal members of that committee that are appointed rather than voted in, and I think that just as we're seeing with some of the other projects going on right now, I think more eyes and more opinions are better rather than fewer. So while I understand and empathize, I think keeping the budget review committee or the finance personnel committee in place makes a lot of sense for me.
Other thoughts? Thanks, David. Other thoughts from board members? Otherwise, again, staff is looking for direction here on what the board would like to do.
I'll make a motion to direct the village's legal team and staff to incorporate the recommended revisions and additions referenced in this memo, along with any additional board directions, and bring a final ordinance to consider at an upcoming board meeting.
All right, thanks, David. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Troy. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor then?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right. Next up, we have reports from village boards, commissions, and committees. Nice transition there. Starting off with the Deer Grove EMS. That's either Troy or Sarah.
Let's see, the first meeting we had, which was on the 18th of January to review the TAA preliminary district study. Didn't realize until after the meeting had happened that this wasn't the final study results, but we did go through it. They looked at current service area and description, personnel and staffing, organization, supervision, making recommendations for all these, recommending doing a facilities, just perform a space needs analysis for each station, operations, performance, and budget. Walk away, I guess, is where do we want additional staffing at which station? Looked at possibly reformulating the formula for financial contributions, and it's a 40-page document here, and I'm just trying to find my notes on that. So right now it's equalized value. Equalized value doesn't necessarily equate to where services are needed, meaning that in general more calls are in the village of Cottage Grove. So they're saying that it possibly should be changed to you look at population and calls for service rather than the equalized value. Unlike a fire or a fire department, those are actual values that they're properties that they're working on, trying to save, minimize damage, and that sort of thing. The other hot button I think is where do they we add staffing. Where do we staff an ambulance 24/7? And a second ambulance at the other station, possibly 12/7. I'm going very wide view on this, Chief. If you have some additions on this, certainly love your input along with Sarah's.
Now, as long as I'm not on double mute, I'll speak. So by the laugh, I'm not on double mute.
Yep.
I'd say the basis of the recommendation are that we have 2 ambulances 24/7, but they understand the fiscal constraints of that and working through the process to get from our current 1 ambulance 24/7 filled in with LTEs to the endpoint of 2 ambulances. So they're working through the process to come up with some good recommendations on how we do that. and we hope to see some good stuff coming from them for our meeting coming up next week.
Thanks, Chief. Any other questions by anyone at this juncture? And then we had our regular meeting Thursday the 20th. Couple things, I guess. We did not do any sort of recommendations as presented by PAA until we have the final study, which we'll have that at our next meeting. We talked about LTE recruitment and retention strategies. The chief is going to come back and with some of the things that were outlined, retirement, sick pay, higher wages and healthcare, and see what each of those areas would cost the district, and take direction from there. We also talked about increasing, which we did approve, increasing penalties for covering Cambridge if they're not giving us enough notifications and modifications to that. What else here? We did give the chief his annual review. He's still with us, so that's a good sign. And our next meeting is on 2/17. One of the things we will be going over is goals with the chief, along with PA study and the financial results of the LTE recruitment. I will note that the Village of Cottage Grove had 3 calls last month. Last month, that was in December. And we had 536 in the village for last year versus 436, quite an increase. Am I missing anything, Sarah or Chief?
No,
you got it.
The only thing I'd add, Troy, is that overall we were about a 25% increase in total calls to 1277, if my memory serves me correct, which I don't
1276, sir. 1276.
Oh, I'm
Drop
sorry.
that one.
I fibbed by one. I apologize. I don't see that as the normal that we'll get a 25% increase per year. I would suspect we'd be more in that 13 to 15% range. But as a reference point, we had almost 150 calls in January, which is a pretty high month for us for the second month in a row. So it's possible we're setting a new normal. We'll have to wait to see how the trends play out for that.
Yeah, for the year we were about 249 more than the year prior, which is like you said, it's a pretty big increase.
All right. No questions then. We'll move on to NADVIG Landfill Monitoring Review Committee. That's either David or Paul.
Yeah, let me pull up the notes here. So landfill lasted for all of about 4 minutes. We approved the bills, and we didn't have minutes from the meeting prior, so we'll try to get those, but then we approved the bills, and then we adjourned.
Any questions for David? All right. Then we move right to Joint Fire Committee, and that's Melissa, David, or Paul.
That'd be me again.
Okay.
So we had Chief's report. Membership level has remained the same at 36. They at the time they interviewed one candidate who was up for a vote as of February 1st. I don't know where they're at with that one. We're at 321 calls for service in 2021, 16 calls for service on the year for 2022, 5 were mutual aid. They're installing the MDTs soon. They're waiting on a few more pieces to do the install. In January, the department completed the active shooter incident management training, one of the first departments in the county to go through that. Ladder 1 had a bad hydraulic leak that was repaired that cost about $5,000. The hydraulic seal broke. Update on the new engine. It's going into production the second week of January. Should have the truck by mid-April. The tender that we did order was originally scheduled for delivery in December of 22, but has been pushed to February of 2023. Asked for an update on consolidated fire agreement. We had no update because we were waiting for the study to be released. update on ARPA funds for radio placements. We got some clarification from Baker Tilly. Sounds like the first 10 million in ARPA funds for municipalities can be used. So we're gonna probably in an upcoming meeting, or probably our next one, we'll talk about here in the village board meeting about how we might be able to use those ARPA funds. We talked about Hydrite. The department did send a letter to Hydrite Chemical. They called and requested a meeting. At that meeting, Hydrite committed to having the alarm company come out and update the flow alarms from 30 seconds to closer to 90 seconds. They're also going to order some new parts to fix some other alarm systems. They aren't sure if they'll have the parts by the due date that the department set, but we'll address that as it comes. We went through the annual report. They're going to do that every year. I thought it was a really nice report they put together. The one thing that Melissa did ask for was milestone dates for the membership in the next edition, and they'll gladly oblige that. We did discuss and consider fire inspections. We didn't make it for this board meeting, but basically there was some, and they did kind of talk about it in the fire study. There's some discrepancies between how the village and the town does fire inspections. Ultimately, the committee voted to let's see here. We motioned to continue with the 2 inspections a year. That motion carried. Then we did discuss and consider the fire inspector pay. And again, that's where the discrepancy comes. I was sorry about that. It's kind of confusing because we talked about it in 2 different agenda items, kind of merged into both. Some more to come there about the fire inspector pay. We discussed the 2021 call data. There's lots of canceled, no incident calls in 2021. That's the overwhelming majority of calls. Is calls that canceled en route, or there's not an issue. We asked about mutual aid calls, whether or not there were any particular neighbors who called more than others. There really isn't. Edgerton and Stoughton do call, but they're our neighbors. Generally, the canceled no incident calls, those are either on the interstate or they're brush calls. So people are burning something in the village and their neighbors call. It tends to happen quite a lot, a couple times a year. Then we talked about the new apparatus. So Squad 1 is going to need replacing. I personally met with the department, the assistant chiefs and the chief to kind of get a feel for things, and definitely wanted to get an order in as soon as possible because the lead times are only getting longer and things are only getting more expensive. And they're going to bring quotes at the next meeting for that. And then as far as we did add a lot of agenda items, most notably, we're going to, this, oddly enough, we talked about meeting more often for other committees. Right now, the fire committee meets every other month. I want to talk about meeting more frequently because the fire department feels that it would be helpful, and we might be able to get to things sooner, especially when it comes to budget items. So our next meeting is Monday, February 28th at 6:30. And I'll reach out to you, Paul and Sarah, to make sure you both can make it because Melissa cannot make that time. So that's all I had.
All right, thanks, David. Any questions for David? All right, we'll move right to Law Enforcement Committee. I'll take a stab at this, and Troy and Sarah or Chief can correct me or jump in. So we met on the 25th of January, covered, Chief outlined and talked about the 3 new officers, 2 of which are experienced, one of which is going to be going through the academy. So we won't unfortunately see him until he's done with that, and that'll be late summer as far as that goes. But the other 2 are hitting the ground already. One of the members is bilingual, which came in handy already. Chief noted very very quickly in his onboarding, which was nice to add to our capabilities as a force. Chief indicated that there have been some technical issues with the license plate readers, so the company is extending the trial. Apparently the cold got to them a bit. There has been already some benefits to them. Again, the company is very interested in trying to make sure that this works because obviously we are a trial community for them. So there is some interest there on their behalf as well. Trying to think other things in here. Chief said the stolen car activity has been down, probably equating that to the extreme cold that we've been experiencing. 2021, the department overall was under budget. There was a complaint the chief was investigating and following up with that citizen. I'll probably get more on that at the next meeting. And that was about it. Troy, is there anything I missed, or Chief? Oh, and then the other thing
There's also some discussion about Lars' retirement.
Yeah, I was just going to say that announcement came following the meeting, so that's everybody's seen that. So after thank Lars for over 9 years of work for the village and surrounding community as one of our officers. I'm sure that the force will do something more than just do a post, which I've recently seen. So certainly appreciate all of Lars's efforts as well as his handler too. Chief, anything else to add? I don't know if you're on tonight.
He's not on, John, but I just wanted to.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, yeah, so we made it official today that Lars has officially retired from service with our department. Doesn't mean he's not a part of our department. He just unfortunately won't be jumping in and out of a squad car. So I know Tony's given him some extra large bones and an extra Kong for the evening. So yeah, I mean, like the post says, it's a bittersweet day for the department. You know, having a canine on the department is an asset. You know, we're going to be short that asset now. You know, we're going to reevaluate the program and you know, get through our new hires here, and then you know, go through a reevaluation in the summer and go from there. But as you all know, it's not a quick turnaround to get a canine up and running. You know, we're looking at a good 6 to 9 month process to get that, you know, just to get that up and running again, and then probably another 3 to 6 months before they're even road ready to assist us again. So yeah, we just wanted to let everyone know, the board wise, that Lars will be around, but not in an official capacity. We want to, you know, definitely thank Officer Karatko for, you know, his dedication to the program, him and the rest of the department getting it started, you know, close to a decade ago. You know, the post says all the good things that Lars did. The amount of times that we all had to wash our uniforms to get the slobber off, that'll lower our water bills at home a little bit, which will kind of be nice. But yeah, we just wanted to thank Lars and Tony for all their hard work over the past decade, and you know, happy retirement to him. And yeah, we will be having a little get together later on. We're kind of hoping COVID settles down a little bit so we can kind of do it in person. And yeah, so like I said, bittersweet day for the department, but you know, as most of us are ready for, he's ready for retirement, and it's good on him. So we appreciate all their hard work and dedication to the village.
All right, thanks, Lieutenant. Appreciate that. Any questions, comments, or we'll move on? Next up is Ordinance Review Committee. Heidi?
Sure,
Kind of
thanks.
touched on some things already.
Yeah, we did. Basically, what we talked about at the meeting was kind of what the committee's thoughts were on recommendations aligning to, you know, redistributing the responsibilities. And I guess I would just add that all the committee members were interested in continuing to serve on other committees as they are available. So when those are available, I hope that we can consider them, as they were very dedicated to the cause. So I I can always contact them to have them fill out a form too. So then they're officially on file.
All right. Any questions for Heidi? And that's good to know too. We have committee openings will be this spring, so we always do have some folks who choose to do some other things. So it's good to have people willing to step up. So I will definitely take a look at that list when we do have those openings and reach out. Public Works and Properties Committee, we met on February 1st. We kind of did a Josh actually from Strand did an overview of, as well as two of his colleagues, Hunter and Ty did an overview of the 2022 projects for the committee. Those are, and we've kind of covered on those are the Highway N reconstruction area down by School Road there, between School Road and Limestone, and then the associated bike path, kind of phase 2 of that. Redoing Oak Street and adding a ped and bike path along there, narrowing it down a little bit. That is also was covered, as well as Taylor Street. And there again, we've got some sewer main that needs to be updated, as well as repaving all the way down into where it really gets rough as you go beyond Heather Drive there. And updating all that. We also discussed with that particular project doing some striping for bikes. Again, making it bike friendly. We've been pushing a lot of that as we do each project. So JJ is working on that with Strand. Next, talked about just a couple folks, citizens that we were snow removal charges we waived for them due to circumstances that were outlined at the meeting. Not typically done, but is in those 2 instances the committee felt warranted. Then went through more of Strand and with Josh at engineering, just update on some of the progress of some of the projects. Things are slowing down a little bit, obviously, with the colder weather. JJ went through his report. We'll be having some fairly soon here. We'll have probably the Clark Street RFP go out. So that's also gonna kind of kick things off because it's the furthest along as far as design and such with that. JJ, anything I missed?
Nope, got it all.
All right, super. Then next up we have Parks, Rec, and Forestry. We've got some discuss and considers there, and I'll turn it right over to Heidi.
Sure, thanks.
And probably Sean.
Yep, I'll be turning over here briefly to Sean. The first item we talked about was Community Parks Redevelopment Plan. As you may recall, we approved some budget items to add some additions and do some replacements at community parks. So I'll turn over to Sean to talk about that. And then we have Blake Thiessen, who's contracted through Strand as our parks design expert. So go ahead, Sean.
Thanks, Eddie. Yeah, I put a little memo in your packet. A few months back, Blake and I met over at Community Park to kind of talk about the improvements that are scheduled for 22. And just kind of the pickleball courts and the playground is what's scheduled for 22. We just kind of started looking at the entire park and started thinking about connectivity from BB all the way down to Wheelbridge. And so plus using the green space that we have in a little better way. So I'm going to turn it over to Blake right now. So Blake Thiessen is from Parkitecture, who is helping us with a couple of projects this summer.
Good evening, everyone. Sean, thanks for the intro. I'm going to go ahead and take screen control here. All right, visible?
You're good. Yes.
Yeah,
you might want to narrow it in a little bit though.
Yep, I sure will. So this the first sheet, I just wanted to kind of show the project extents here of Community Park. As Sean alluded to, when we were on site, we really started take a step back and think about, all right, is there an opportunity for a through connection through the park? And the western segment of this park is really infrequently used, but if you haven't been out there, take a walk. It's a beautiful little spot and a great opportunity. So we looked at how to make the connection through. There was really two options, one being through this sliver of land that is currently village owned. However, it has some challenges with grading and stormwater flow from BB. And so as an alternative, we looked at trying to get a connection through on the west side of Black Bear. And there is an existing easement along the western property line. However, that also has physical challenges with grading and stormwater conveyance. So currently we're showing it just at the top of that slope on the western flanks of the existing parking. So this will take some coordination with the property owner, but we're hoping that it's a benefit for both parties and the community at large. So as we come down, this actually, let me zoom in here. So the creek runs, you can kind of see it here, snaking through, and then it weaves its way through the park. And this is the existing bridge that some of you may have seen. So to make this work, we're suggesting another small bridge, pedestrian scale, to cross the creek here and get into this back chunk of land. And that brings you down through the woods. And there is some existing trail network back here. I'm not sure how frequently it's used, but it is quite a nice spot. So again, I would encourage you to take a walk. So we cross the existing bridge and that gets us into kind of the heart of the park. And let's ignore the proposed amenities for a second. The idea here is just to get pedestrians through, and then we're going to make the connection on the west side of the existing parking lot down. And we're currently showing it on the west side of the diamond on the outfield and connecting up to this intersection here at Wheel Bridge. We did look at an alternative coming through on the east side of the diamond, but this gets really tight. And we were afraid that'd be a conflict with the diamond and the backyards of these homes. So this works really well from a grading perspective. It does displace the sand volleyball court. And after some discussions with Sean and Josh, it doesn't seem like that's going to be a huge loss to overcome. Sand volleyball is easy to displace and relocate if you need it. So one other thing while I'm on this exhibit, I wanted to highlight, as Sean and I went through the proposed amenities to go back into the park, you know, basketball is one of those that currently sits in this spot and really seems to be underutilized in this location. And so we looked at trying to find a more suitable spot for it. I like to put basketball out front of a park where you have lots of visibility, lots of eyes on the facility, and really good access. Basketball courts typically don't work well when they're tucked back inside the deeper areas of a park. Plus, this area is underutilized, and by luck, it fits really well. And I heard the village president knows how to play ball pretty well. So that works out as well. So that's where this is in all of the concepts we looked at. This is the proposed location. As you can start to see in this graphic, a lot of the elements that we're trying to include in the park are pretty sizable flat footprints. And so to get everything crammed up in here really didn't work very well. All right, so I'm going to walk you through some design iteration here. The first option we looked at took the 4 pickleball courts, stretched them out in a linear fashion, and we hugged the tree line on the west side of the park. The existing shelter, which you can see in the background here, in our opinion, really is in a poor location. It blocks all of your sight lines into the back of the park. You know, it's a pretty good sized structure. And so you've got a little peak here to the west and a little peak through to the east. So this initial concept looked at taking a similar footprint and hugging the eastern side of the park, you know, still keeping it in close proximity with the utilities that are there, but really giving you a nice open view shed into the back of the park. The other item to note here is that the playground is shown over the existing footprint. So this eastern edge is exactly where the existing playground is now. So this also adds a small open air 4-post style structure that would serve as a shelter for the playground, as well as the smart soccer area, which is up here to the north. One of the benefits of taking the basketball court out of this concept is now we've essentially doubled our available footprint for smart soccer. And it's very easy to get to and very easy to see. One other thing I wanted to point out here is that you see we've added a short piece of concrete sidewalk here, a designated crosswalk, and then some additional concrete infrastructure here. That is to provide ADA access to the ball diamond, which currently does not meet code compliance for ADA. So this is a pretty low cost solution. I also really like the idea of adding this striped crosswalk. Whether you're disabled or not, it's always good practice to have a safe crossing to get to our restroom and shelter facilities. So that was concept A. Concept B took a little bit different approach. We tried to center everything in the park, still maintaining good sight lines here on the east. This takes the same alignment of your existing shelter, but shifts it to the west about half of a building length. So we're still taking advantage of the utility stubs for sanitary and water, trying to minimize the extra cost there. Hugged it up tight with our courts. And this is in a 2x2 stack, which is obviously different than our stretch in the last scenario. The biggest advantage of this concept is it allows this really mature heritage oak to breathe. It gives you, 3 sides of potential picnic space around that oak to really celebrate its natural beauty. And it again maintains some good sight lines into the park. We also decided to take a different look at the playground, and we flipped it and moved it closer to the woods to try and take advantage of the shade from the existing tree line. So in the afternoon, it still allows for really good access into the back of the park for the smart soccer. Again, that area has now doubled in size. And so all of our facilities are now fully ADA compliant with a nice loop trail accessing the playground and then beyond into the woods. So these first 2 concepts were reviewed by village staff. And Aaron came back and reminded us that we do have a 50-foot side yard setback in parks, which would apply to the building and potentially the playground. So, this is where it is now, but we probably would not want to replicate that. So concept C sort of hybridizes the 2 earlier versions. It takes the shelter building and rotates it on a 90-degree axis, again, trying to maximize those existing laterals and minimize the cost. We stretch out our courts, so we've got 2 really good sight lines into the back. And to further that, I rotated the playground again, taking further advantage of the wood line and giving us maximum penetration into the back area of the park. All the other elements are the same, the trail connections, our sidewalk access here. And this really gives the maximum amount of room for this oak to really be by itself. So at Parks last week, we had pretty good discussion and substantial support for option C. I believe, Heidi, it was a unanimous vote of approval on C. Yeah.
Yep.
So the other thing I wanted to touch on here is the phasing of construction, assuming that this concept meets approval. And I always like to think about our plans, not only in terms of good spatial orientation, but how do we physically construct this and get from A to Z without disrupting what we did in prior stages? And with the playground and the pickleball court being budgeted for 22 construction, the nice thing is that we can build both of these elements remove the existing basketball court in one project, well, at least we'll tie the removal to probably the playground project. We can leave the existing shelter and existing trail network in to this point and potentially just punch in a temporary path to get our ADA access to the playground and the backside of the courts without going through the need to reconstruct all of the pathway or the shelter now. Those can be a future phase project without any disruption to the western pieces. So the good news is it sequences really well. We just had another pickleball court complex bid last week in McFarland. So I have some very, very recent prices on the courts and feel pretty confident that what is budgeted is within reason. So with that, I guess I'll turn it back to Heidi or Sean or questions.
Thanks, Blake. I just add that the Parks Committee did talk about all the different options, and they raised a few questions about the sight lines and the orientation of the pickleball courts. And we did vote unanimously for option C. And like Blake was just explaining, the playground and the pickleball courts are the budgeted item for this year. And then, we wanted to plan this ahead so we can, not redo what we did previously when we move forward with the shelter and other parts of the park. Sean, you have anything else to add on that?
Nope, I think you got it all.
Actually, I'm gonna amend my pause on my statement. One of the questions I often get with pickleball complexes is how should those courts be oriented in an optimal scenario? And in a wide open park setting, I would usually say we want our courts to be on a true north-south axis. And there are diehard pickleballers in Dane County, and they interface with us on a regular basis on all of our projects. And in this scenario, I have no concern about an angled orientation given the adjacency of the mature tree line, A, for shade, and B, for wind protection. So if you hear someone saying, oh, that's a strange angle, why would you do that? It has been thoroughly thought through. This is not just thrown in here because it fits. So just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Blake. I've got a few questions. So, when my kids were a little bit younger, this is a few years ago, I do remember that the grading on that western slope of that park was, at least I'd never let them get down towards the creek. Can you comment on the grading that you'll do for the pickleball courts and the playground?
Yeah, so I guess I don't have the contours turned on here, but the banks of the slope don't start until well out here. And this area where we're showing the courts currently is that kind of small depression where the old rink was.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about putting these courts right in that depression is that to build those courts, I need about 12 to 13 inches of imported material between our stone base course and our asphalt. So I would anticipate we're probably going to bring in some structural fill underneath this to elevate it a little bit higher above the banks, and then bring in our stone and asphalt, just because we want it to sit a little bit high and proud for good drainage in this area.
Okay.
So I think this will work really well. And similarly, the playground, we typically will ring our playgrounds with either a concrete, 5-foot walk or a concrete curb to retain all the surfacing. And again, I would want to perch this a little high just to make sure we've got enough drainage to get the water out and around. And we'll have to look at how close this gets. This did come up at committee a little bit and whether it would be an issue for safety. If it does start to feel a little bit close, we'll either cheat it a little bit east, or we'll look at a possibility is a split rail fence or some sort of visible barrier We did, as since I'm talking about this corner, we did talk at committee about clearing out some of the invasive understory here to improve sight lines coming around this corner. You know, that was a concern. If someone is riding their bike through here, that they might come in a little hot. I don't think that's going to be an issue, but we did talk about trying to clean this up a little bit in tandem.
Yeah, I would advocate for that. I think, which actually leads to my next question. On your, I can't remember, I think it was the first page, right, where you talked about the kind of the path leading back to the northwest side of the property.
Yeah.
Can you comment on because that where it goes from red to black, that's the Black Bears property, correct?
Correct, right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. So there is an existing easement along this area, but you can see the creek kind of snakes through here. So what we're currently showing is outside of that easement on the Black Bear property. So this is going to take further investigation, discussion with the property owner. We might go back and revisit this. There are some drainage concerns with the pipes outletting in the creek. So this may be a future project to fix some of that. And if that's the case, then that might be a viable scenario. One of the reasons I really like popping it out here on the western corner is that we're much closer to this intersection.
Yep.
I'm really uncomfortable with trying to push bicyclists and pedestrians into a mid-block scenario. Even though we're not going to encourage the crossing, human nature is to play Frogger. And the closer we can get them to this designated intersection, I think the better off we all are.
I think too, because to the east of the village property is a daycare, and I don't think they'd get too excited about a bike path. I don't know. I'm just guessing out loud, but
yeah, I mean that is true. That there is some really strange grading happening in here too, so that's going to make this a little more challenging. But I hadn't thought through your point about this. They might not want the added traffic. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a good comment.
And then last 2 points. Well, I have one point to make and then a question. As far as the open air shelter on option 3, as someone who has spent many, many, many hours at a park that I didn't want to be at, and I wanted to sit somewhere in the shade, thank you for adding that next to the playground, because my kids still go to parks and I still always look for the shade. Call me an old guy, I don't know, but either way, thank you for adding that. And then the last question, about the shelter, the big shelter, kind of in the center of the page there. You did mention with it in the option 3 here, does that change because the building of the orientation of the building has changed? Does that change how the utility stubs work? Would you have to relocate those?
No, in general, no, because they're going to be in this same footprint. So whether we tie on an extra 8 feet in one way or another, the nice thing is we're not, running utilities to somewhere totally different in the park. So I think there is going to be a small cost for infrastructure improvement, but nothing substantial.
Okay.
Now, that said, let me expand on your question here. There are different ways to think through the design of this structure. And Sean and I have talked about, all right, does it make sense to follow the existing model and in our rectangle have one half of that be our restrooms and storage and the other half be open air? Or do we think a little bit differently, and do we look at a 3-part rectangle where you have an open air chunk, an open air chunk, and maybe your restrooms are in the middle? And so now all of a sudden with that same footprint, we've established an opportunity for 2 rental spaces, 2 different gathering groups to coexist under the same structure at the same time. So that may play a little bit into where these, how we have to expand the utilities, but either way, I don't think it's a big lift.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Yeah, good questions.
Blake, this is John. I'll ask a couple questions in regards to, this might be for Sean or Heidi and the committee. What's the timeline for this? Obviously, pickleball and the playground are in this year's budget. I think the shelter is a couple years out for replacement, I believe. I can't recall. But then there's, you know, the rest of the path and the basketball court. Did the committee discuss this at all, Sean or
No,
Heidi?
no, we didn't. We just wanted to, you're correct in what's happening this year, pickleball courts and playground, and that is what's obviously approved. When we started looking at the whole project, we just wanted to get it right on paper so that, yeah, nothing's been talked about as far as the timeline, John, for any part of the trail or even the basketball court. So that's something we'll have to work through in future budgets.
I just,
And again, go ahead, Heidi.
oh yeah, just add on to that. The park development fund is strong, and we'll have more information on that before budget season. So we may be able to, you know, incorporate some of that and, you know, maybe, you know, look at when we'd be touching this park again and propose that for, you know, when the shelter went in or something, because we do have those funds also.
Okay. And obviously we're pushing as a board all the time for connectivity using PED and bike paths. So, you know, if we can have that higher in the list. Now, again, I don't know, you know, you don't want to necessarily put something in there if it's going to get torn up because you're putting in the shelter. But if the shelter's 4 years out and you want to get that path, then that might be a little better. Then I had a question about the basketball court. Just that in regards to safety of whoever's playing there, because we do have on a regular basis some folks with some strong arms, and they land that ball right over here, right into our backyard at a regular basis, which is fine. But I get concerned if some kids are playing in that basketball court, if we've thought about, you know, anything there, because again, they're popping that out there on a routine basis.
Yeah, that's a real good question. I don't recall the outfield dimension on this field. And I guess it doesn't really matter if they're hitting it into your yard. Looks like you've done some strategic screening maybe to try and limit that. But yeah, we might want to look at some strategic plantings here, or if it continues to be a problem, you know, I can talk with Sean about short segments of netting or other strategies to limit that.
Okay, good. Just
we could put up a green Sorry, John. We could put up a green monster.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure that that was covered. And again, encourage the Parks Committee to, you know, look at that path sooner rather than later, because it would be another nice connector within the village, and we continue to try to push that way. So, any other questions regarding this item of parks from any board member?
No question. I'll just clarify my statement just because I don't want to assume everyone's a baseball fan. There's a big wall in Fenway Park for the Boston Red Sox that's called the Green Monster. So anyway, I realize that might, you know, if someone that's not a sports fan that heard that might be like, what is that guy talking about? So anyway, I'll be quiet now.
That's all right. Other questions from board members? Otherwise, as Heidi will probably say, this is a discuss and consider. So again, Parks is looking direct, you know, for further direction from the board, I think, on this concept C, I believe.
I'll move to approve the master plan as presented for community park.
Second.
All right, we have a motion second. Any further discussion? Having heard none, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries.
Aye.
Oops. Hey, Melissa, were you opposing or are you in favor?
I am abstaining because I don't know what the motion is at all.
Okay, all right. We'll have to catch you up. All right. Glad you're here. So motion carries then, and we'll move on then. Heidi's going to probably cover the next couple items or discuss and consider as well, because those were covered in the parks meeting. So go ahead, Heidi.
Yeah, we had
Or
a
Sean.
busy meeting. So the next item we talked about is the 5-year Parks and Open Space Plan. The last time the plan was updated, I believe, was 2018. And in order to qualify for certain grants for parks opportunities, we do need an updated Parks and Open Space Plan every 5 years. So we want to start kind of chipping away at updating it. There's a lot of sections to the plan, and Aaron has experience working on this and helped us with our last plan, and he'll be working with the committee to go through that update throughout this year. Then we are starting to talk about the Music in the Grove season 2022, and it's coming up soon enough that we have to start planning for it. So Sean has a memo here about the Music in the Grove, and generally we suspend some ordinances during that time. So Sean, did you have anything you want to add on Music in the Grove?
No, not really. The first one is the one we bring back every year, just allowing to have beer and wine in the park where Music in the Grove is occurring, and it'll be at Bakken Park, with the exception of the one for Fireman's Fest. So all the dates are listed, and it's just for those specific dates from 6 to 8 p.m.
All right, any questions on that or a motion?
A motion to approve allowing alcohol for the dates that are listed in Bakken Park for the 2022, dates that are listed for the Music in the Grove events.
I can't.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, David. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right. Keep going, Heidi.
Yep, so then we have the sound amplification. So that's also discuss and consider for Music in the Grove. I'd make a motion to suspend the sound or to approve the sound amplification permit for 2022 Music in the Grove events as listed.
Right, thanks, Heidi. Is there thanks, Sarah or Troy? I don't know who was quicker on the response. I'll let Lisa decide. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right, Heidi, anything else, or Sean?
Yeah, we did have a couple other items. The Miracle Field, as part of their plan, was to add a few lights to their field, since they do play as it starts to get a little bit dark. So they're raising funds to complete that part of their plan. So Sean gave us the pictures on that. And Sam, our rec coordinator, is leaving Cottage Grove to go to DeForest. He is excited about the opportunity to work with their large rec facility in DeForest. So it's unfortunate for us, but we're happy that he's pursuing, something to expand his horizons. So Sean's working on posting that, and I believe we already have some applicants to fill his position. So wish him well from us.
All right, thanks, Heidi. Any questions for Heidi? All right, we'll move right to reports from village officers. First up is a nomination. This again is for the Tourism Commission. This person represents our Comfort Suites and provided their application as well. So any questions on that? Or consideration nomination?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Heidi. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor then?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries. Rick, anything from legal updates? Anything other?
Nothing to report for you guys.
All right. Thanks, Rick. Next up is communication miscellaneous business. First up there is consideration for approval for vouchers. Any questions, comments with the bills?
I make a motion to approve the bills as listed.
All right. Thanks, David. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Paul. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Correspondence. There was a bit of a flurry over the weekend of reporters. I think the board saw most of those. In regards to Project Silver Eagle, also in that same vein, we did have a just note that we had an email from a citizen in Andrew Cardinal at 114 Glen Drive in support of the project. So just in regards to that as well, there were two question and answer calls today with that particular project as well for anyone that wanted to ask questions from citizens. So that was also nice to see. Any other correspondence that board members want to bring up?
I'll just add on that same topic. There was a message. I check my junk mailbox periodically because sometimes messages get routed there. There was a message in support of the project Silver Eagle from Kevin Brokey. And so I found that in my junk mailbox. So just a tip to keep an eye on that.
Thanks, Heidi. Upcoming community events. The ice skating rink is getting plenty of use. Just want to let everybody know that. That's good. All right, nobody has anything else? Future agenda items. We'll be covering a number of committees. Plan Commission, certainly. There'll be some things there. Matt, anything else worth of note?
Possibly the actual ordinance drafting that we, based on the direction from tonight. But other than that, nothing in addition.
All right. Anyone else? Okay. All right, then we'll move right down to item 10. I'll make a motion to the village board. We'll go into closed session. The closed session is establishing and negotiating a position regarding the Deer Grove EMS district and joint fire agreements. The Village of Cottage Road Village Board will enter the closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85 (1) (e), deliberating and negotiating the purchasing public properties and the investing of public funds, or the conducting other than specified public business where of competitive or bargaining reasons. And of course, on the next page, require a closed session. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Troy. This is a roll call. So Lisa, please.
Sure. Ratcliffe,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Allen,
Aye.
Vandervelde,
Aye.
Murphy,
Aye.
Valencia,
Aye.
and Peterson.
Aye.
We're in closed session. Thanks, everybody.